Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 233, maybe 234 of Inside the SCCA, presented by RaceSchool.com. Brian Bielanski here. Little short break. We didn't have a full show last week, and we've talked about it a couple times, or I've talked about it a couple times on the show. Moved into a new studio, moved into a new house, and had to rebuild the studio. And with that, I decided to do some upgrades. And the upgrades are going to make the show a lot better, and it's going to look better. But there have been some technical gremlins, and that's why we took the break this week to work through those. And I've made some big progress on the things that were really bugging me. And then our guest today just got to help me work through a bunch of audio technical gremlins. So he gets the gold star for patience today. And that would be our guest, which is a show I've been looking forward to do for a long time, and I'm excited about it. Dayle Frame is here. Dayle, good morning, sir. How are you?
Not too bad. I'm doing well. We're getting ready to go out to Kansas City for a board meeting and a CRB meeting later this week, so the timing could not be more perfect to chat with you about all things club racing,
Well,
etc.
I'm so glad to have you here. So you have a very interesting background in our sport. Like a lot of us, you have worn lots of different hats, and actually at the moment you wear several different hats. So we're going to get to that in a minute, but I ask every guest who's on the show for the first time the same question. I don't know if you've watched the show, and if you haven't, you don't have to say so, but the guest is the question's pretty simple. How did you get mixed up in this crazy sport that we love?
Well, full disclosure, I've watched a few episodes of yours of this show, and I'm not a religious viewer, but I have watched a few over the years. Yeah, the answer is simple. Just like a lot of folks in this club, my family was in this club back in the day. I watched my father race Lotus Super Sevens when I was a kid back in the '60s, and by the time I was old enough to appreciate what he was doing, I thought, man, this is fun. And so I got out of school, got out of grad school, got married, and my then girlfriend, now wife, I told her, I said, hey, at some point I'm going to want to play cars, and and so we knew this was part of the agenda. And once we got done paying off student loans and got a house and all that jazz got set up, I bought a Sprite and off we went. So yeah.
Yeah. So did you spring this on your wife before or after she said, I do?
Oh, well before.
Okay.
So we met in college in the mid '80s, and I took her to the '88 June sprints.
Ah,
And because Road America was perilously close to where her parents had moved to a town called Rhinelander, Wisconsin,
oh, yeah.
and which is way up almost to the UP. And
Yep.
so we went to the June sprints, and this is before they put in stairs down to Canada Corner. So that's
Okay.
how old. Um, and we walked down there, and we're all the way over to the right, looking up towards the kink, and we're watching the V's and the 500s, or actually back then 440s, and Fords, and we see two of them touch tires, and one of them did what we call in the F&C business the mating dance, and one went vertical. And I explained to her about how the tires are rotating in different directions, and it just doesn't happen. And so she, 5 minutes after she's watching this, she sees a Formula V go airborne. And, oh, geez, there goes my chance to ever play cars. But I explained it to her and the physics involved, and she said, well, it seems to me that if they have fenders, you can't do that. And I said, that's exactly right. And she said, well,
Yep.
okay, you can race anything you want as long as it's got fenders.
Okay.
Then the next session was Sport 2000s and C&D sports racing, and she fell in love with the Lola T592s
Sure.
that had the little skirts on the back. And she thought, oh, those are the greatest things. They look awesome. I said, honey, we can't afford those, and I'm not cool enough. So we settled on a Sprite a few years later, and off we went.
So prior to getting married, I had dated some folks, and each of them had this idea that this racing thing was a phase and they could change me. And those relationships didn't last very long. Because I'd been racing since I was 16, and I was at that 1988 June sprints that you were at. My dad was racing in Sports Renault at the time.
Sure.
And if you remember that was probably an 80, 90 car field that year.
Yeah.
So anyway, when I met my wife, I say my current wife, she's my only wife, but when I met my wife before she was my wife, we had a long conversation. I said, okay, here's the deal. I've been doing this my whole life. I'm going to do it for the rest of my life. If you'd like to stay with me, great. Don't ask me to ever stop doing it.
Right.
And my vow to you is I will never make the family go bankrupt for me to go racing. That's my vow. And as long as you never ask me to stop, we'll be fine. And if you do, I know this divorce lawyer,
Right.
and I'm not afraid to use it. So,
Who's racing a GT1 this weekend, right?
Exactly. 26 years later, we're still together, and she's never once asked me to stop racing. So it's worked out great. But so you get into the racing thing, you do the Bug Eye Sprite thing, and like a lot of people, I'm going to guess. Well, let me guess. I'm going to guess that, like a lot of people, you raced for a long time before you got involved in how the club works, right?
Actually, it was a little bit backwards.
Oh.
I realized that my job at the time, I was a research chemist here at Michigan State University, and I realized that I did not have an unlimited bank account. I did not have an unlimited amount of time. And I thought, if I get ahead of the curve a little bit, that will pay off dividends later. So when I joined in the mid 90s, I actually became a corner worker first.
Okay.
And I went to all the tracks. Where's registration here? And where's tech there? And where's, blah, 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 blah. So I knew where everything was at Road America and Blackhawk and Grattan and Gingerman, which had just opened a couple years earlier. And Mid-Ohio and IRP was still viable back then, and that sort of thing. So I learned some background stuff so that when I went, I told myself, whether it was accurate or not, I don't know, but I told myself, if I go to a track and I've been there before and I understand where everything is and who does what and how the sausage is made and all that jazz, I could concentrate on actually learning the craft of driving.
Yeah.
And that was also right about the time when I bought my first car in 2000, that the limited prep production rules were coming into phase, so that I would not spend countless hours rebuilding motors in the garage. I don't want to be an expert at racing or rebuilding motors. I want to be an expert at getting cockpit time and understanding the craft of racing. And so that's what I did. I was a corner worker for several years before I bought my car. I used that time to go visit folks. I'd see drivers at tracks, and I'd say, hey, it would be okay if I spent a Saturday with you while you're prepping your car or loading the trailer, give you a hand with some of that stuff so that I understand what it takes to do that. And my learning curve is flatter when it comes time to actually putting the helmet on and doing it to it. So, yeah.
And then you chose a Bug Eye Sprite.
Actually, no, I had a square body. My first car was, like me, a 62.
Okay.
But it was the first year of the square bodies.
Got it.
And so, yeah, I bought it off a cat in Cincinnati. And the rest is, as they say, is history. Yeah.
So if you wanted to not work on the car a lot, is the Sprite the right choice?
Brian, you've hit the nail on the head in terms of the irony department. When I bought that car, it was a mess.
Yeah.
As a lot of race cars are. It had suffered what we in the chemistry and physics business called entropy.
Yeah.
Chaos had taken over. Wiring is every which way but loose. Piping was all over the place. It was a mess. And so I had bought the car in 2000, and I spent the winter of 2000, 2001
Hmm.
basically just cleaning things up and getting stuff organized.
Right.
And then I raced it for a couple years, and I realized in the fall of '06, six, after the first year of Topeka runoffs, I'd been to the runoffs a couple times. I did okay, but was never top 10, nor did I expect to be honest. But
Right.
I just needed a better car. And so I did a frame off, pardon the pun, restoration of it. Every nut, every bolt, every wire,
Right.
everything, and rebuilt the car the way God intended. Rewired the whole thing, replumbed every facet of it, and it was a great job, but it took 2 years,
Yeah.
yeah, to do all that. Throw in the '08 housing crunch and everything else. I probably wouldn't have been racing a whole lot then anyway. But yeah, it was quite the labor of love, and I got about 2,000 pictures to prove it.
You have to love the car
Oh yeah,
to do that because there's obviously a lot easier ways to get more reliability, like
yeah,
switching cars.
right.
At that time, what year was this?
I started in the fall of '06.
Okay. So
Got,
by
got back
by
on track in '09.
by '06, there's a tons of options that are a lot less work
Yep.
and probably even after all the work is done, still more reliable.
Yeah.
And but when you love a platform, it's what you do, right?
Oh yeah. 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 You realize, and at that time, my teeny little Sprite had monopolized both halves of a two-car garage, and my
Mm-hmm.
wife was parking outside. And I'll remind viewers, I live in Michigan, and that did not go over real well every
Yeah.
day when she'd have to scrape the ice off the windshield. And so I'd come home from work and I'd spend a couple hours here and there and document the whole thing because I had a woundedturtleracing.org website back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd put up new photos, and it was what was basically a Facebook blog before there was Facebook.
Yeah.
And you're right. You have to have the passion to go in there. And this is an unheated garage, and again in Michigan,
Yeah.
back in the day. So yeah, there was lots of hours out there. Now the good news is I had a legion of friends who lived in Michigan as
Mm-hmm.
well, and so weekends I'd have a guy come over who I knew could weld,
Mm-hmm.
or a friend who could do this or do that or do the other. I did not have to have every skill set.
Right.
Lots of friends who could help me out with stuff like that. I'd trade them lunch and a six pack of beer
Yep.
for doing this or that. And so it becomes a communal thing because friends of mine who also race Sprites or Spitfires or what have you, we all we're a we're a bunch that has a tight knit bond just because it's us against them, right?
Right.
We don't have roofs.
So so we should maybe schedule a time to do a whole show on what it takes to do a frame off restoration on a Sprite because
Yeah.
I'm a maker. We talk about this on the show all the time. Whether it's creating YouTube, whether it's working 35 years in television news, now I'm in radio. Every day I'm making something, whether
Yep.
it's with my fingers on a keyboard, whether it's building my sim rig, which I built from scratch, and that's going to be an episode on the show here eventually too. I make things. I've worked on race cars. I started working and helping my dad build his first IT car. When you love making and doing things like that, what was more fun for you? Was the process of building that car as fun as driving it?
Um, Pretty close, I'll tell you. I tell folks if I was any good at calculus, I'd be an engineer, but I
Uh,
wasn't, so I'm a chemist. And there's, production car rules are such that you can build a better mousetrap. It's not Spec Miata, it's not
right.
IT, it's not showroom stock, and it's not GT where unlimited dollars get to be spent on whatever.
Right.
Production rules, you're hemmed in by certain constraints, but so it was fun designing and building a better mousetrap for things.
Right.
Like when I redid the car, one of the things I did was I put in a tonneau cover basically behind me,
Got
and I
it.
had to build that in a couple of different panels in order to fit around the cage. Well,
Okay.
how do you do that? Well, you get a bunch of cardboard and some Sharpies and some snips, and you start doing it.
Right.
And I mean, that was probably that little project, that thing probably took me 20 hours to design and execute. The other one that I was really fond of when the dust settled was after a crash at the Kink at Road America, which wiped out my first car.
Mm.
I got a second one, and I wanted to make it a 1500 nose. It's a slightly different nose for the 1500 Sprite, and so I wanted to make that. But the problem is, how do you get enough air into the car to keep the engine cool? And so I had to take an air dam and a bumper assembly and all that jazz that's all fiberglass and put some aluminum sheeting behind it in order to guide all the air inside to the radiator and not waste any of it. If I'm going to bump into air, I might as well have it use it for something.
Right.
So that was, oh my God, that was dozens of hours to shape and contour everything on compound curves behind the air dam and into through the valence and into the radiator shroud. And that was awfully sexy when I got done. It got to be two Zeus fasteners on the front and it came off as one piece. I
Yeah.
thought, wow, that's just the coolest thing since sliced bread. Was it effective? Yeah, marginally so,
Yeah.
but it
What I
was
always
cool.
helping my dad with his cars growing up, our fabrication was non-existent. If it was something we could bolt on and bolt back on, that's something I could do. But if I
Yeah.
had to make a part or anything, we just didn't have the stuff for that. We were a regular old, two-car garage like you were talking about. But when I moved to Atlanta and built my first race car, which was an ITC Civic, I started working. We rented space in what was Jim Downey's first race shop. He
Wow.
had moved on to a bigger shop because he became Jim Downey with the kudzu and all this kind of stuff. But he
Right.
had this small shop in the back of a neighborhood. And when he moved to the big shop, he left a lot of the fabrication tools behind. And then he rented it us to 6 or 10 of us SCCA racers for a couple $100 a month so that we could work on our cars and store them there. And I was now introduced to this world of like metal brakes and stuff to be able to bend tube and all this kind of stuff. And I had never touched this stuff, and I had to make something stupid like a switch panel, and I bet you I spent a week learning how to do it. And I had so much fun and realized that's what I really realized, that fidgeting and futzing around, and as my wife likes to call it, garage therapy. When I get cranky, she says, go change the oil. And I come back happier, even though I changed the oil last week, which means I guess I'm cranky a lot. But I really enjoy that. It's therapeutic, it's cathartic, and when you start with a piece of anything and then it ends up as something else and it works,
Right.
that's just the coolest thing.
Yeah, I one of the things I learned from doing my day trips to fellow racers before I bought my car, I would go visit folks, I'd help them out for a day, and I understood the time constraints. Yes, this is an expensive hobby to have, but more importantly, it's a time
Suck.
suck in that you really have to be careful about how you use your time.
Right.
And as long as it's not Thursday night at 3 o'clock in the morning when you have to trailer out 4 hours from now, then yes, you're right. It's fun to do that sort
Yeah.
of thing to understand how to make something better. I I one of my very good friends down in Cincinnati, uh, works for a company that sells electrical stuff. And so when I rewired the car in, what was that, 15, um, I bought all the switches and all that jazz from him, and he showed me how to properly wire a car. Everything's 90-degree angles, everything's
Right.
soldered, the ends are clipped off, it's crimped, it's shrink wrapped, it's da 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 da.
Yep.
And oh my goodness, I realized how sloppy
Yeah.
it was before Rob sprinkled his fairy dust on it. And it's just amazing how, if you do that job once and you do it right, you'll never have to screw with it again.
Right.
And the ghost of my old man would be standing on my shoulder. Dale, you got one chance to do the job right.
I love it.
And
Yeah.
and he's right. He was right.
There
And so
also,
it's a lot of fun to do that stuff and make sure you do it right.
yeah. There also is the time where you have to decide when someone's expertise is worth your dollar.
Oh yeah.
And while I'm convinced today, now 30 years into this sport, that if I had the time, I could learn to do anything. I could learn to build a cage. I could learn to do all this stuff. But is it worth my time to take it to do some of that stuff? And at some point, you have to do it because you don't have the money. So but if you do have the money, sometimes you have to say to yourself, okay, what's a smart use of my time right now, and knowing what you're good at and what you're not, and that's also part of the process.
Yeah, I learned early on that it would have been neat to learn how to weld. It's
Yeah,
a skill. I might have to do it a few times, but I also had friends who were very good at it,
yeah,
and I would never be good as them.
yeah,
And fast forward to when I moved out of the garage and into a 3,500 square foot shop about 5 miles over my right shoulder. And the guy, it was in a building like a strip mall, and it had sections, and he was at the end, and he was a welder trained by the Army to be a
hmm,
welder. He knew more about welding than he's forgotten more about
right,
welding than most people ever know. And so, plus he was allergic to receipts. So he would do something for me, and I'd slip him a 20,
yeah,
and invariably, Bill would say, well, we used the TIG on that aluminum stuff. How about $15? I said,
yeah,
oh, come on, man. I give him $25 because he undersold himself. But that's a skill that I would have liked to have had, but I'm not going to learn it now.
yeah,
I I knew people who knew how to do that stuff. I never built my own motors because I wasn't smart enough. I will pay somebody to do
yeah,
that. George Bachman was my motor builder, and he built some really great motors. Um, I also, while I understand what the inside of a transmission does, I certainly didn't want to take an old British transmission
right,
apart. Man, they got ball bearings and little springs and all sorts of little bits and pieces that could
sure,
fall out of it the wrong way. And so I took that to people who knew what the heck they were doing.
yeah,
And
smart,
it was a black box to me, and that's fine. I'm more than happy to pay for stuff that I cannot do.
yeah.
My old man told me told me dozens of times a long time ago, Dale, I don't pull my own teeth and I don't do my own lawyering. You go to people who know what the hell they're doing.
Yeah. It's like when I go to get my hair cut, I'm like, I won't tell you how to cut my hair as long as you don't ask me to tell you to change the way I work on my cars. So and that's pretty smart. Go to the experts. Although I will say on the welding thing, I'm contemplating a project to build a formula car for adults, as I like to call it. Which will be a little bit wider than the typical
There you go.
formula car. And because I think part of the problem with our formula car numbers, open wheel numbers, is that a lot of us who would love to race open wheel can't fit in the cars. And
Yeah,
if there
yeah.
were options, I think more people would do it.
I having met you at Road America at the June Sprints when we sort of set all of this stuff up, you and I are of the same physiognomy, as we might say, and so yeah, there's damn few formula cars that
Oh,
I can get into,
yeah,
and I'm 6 foot 285, and even when I was racing my Sprite, I was 260 or something, and
right.
that's I had a 17-inch seat for a reason. And so you're right. If now I will say that there are some Formula Ford and Formula 500 chassis that are built with wider cockpits.
Right.
But of course, in those cars, you're still punching a hole in the air.
Yeah.
And so you have to be very circumspect about how you do that. But I applaud your efforts, sir.
Yeah. I just think, as I tell people, I'm built to be an IndyCar driver from the height standpoint, but not from the width standpoint.
Right.
So
Right.
I am the perfect race car driver height at 5'6", but I'm almost as wide as I am tall. So that's problematic. All right, Dayle, we brought you here to talk about some stuff,
Oh,
and
not my
let's.
devastating good looks. Okay.
I know. Well, there's that too. So that was the first check box off the list. Is he camera friendly? So let me do this. Let me take a short break. Thank all the people that helped me do this, and then when we get back, we're going to talk about the Club Racing Board. We're going to talk about being an Area 4 director. We're going to talk about this little letter that you wrote that got me thinking, which I thought was fantastic, by the way, and a whole bunch of cool stuff. But that's going to come up next. So don't go anywhere, everybody, and I will be right back with that. So, all right. So raceschool.com. I guess they're over my shoulder right there. They are our presenting sponsor, and they have been our sponsor for the last year. We love having them on board, and we thank them so much for being part of it. If you want to come and get your racing license, if you want to learn how to drive your car safely, if you want to send your kid to a teen safety driver skill type thing, these are the people to go. They're out here in Southern California, so you're almost guaranteed to have really good weather for your school. Check them out, raceschool.com. William R. Penterick and Associates, that's David Penterick, GT1 driver, Spec MX5 driver. He is a guy who will help you with your finances, finds you the best way to save your money, to grow your money, to do money stuff. Remember what I said earlier, how I want to find the experts to help me with things? Well, that is one thing that I am not an expert in. If I had money, I'd go to David and ask him to help me with it. So check him out. The official sim racing league of Inside the SCCA is Ray Esports. And as soon as I'm done actually recording this podcast, I'm going to jump into my sim rig and do a Formula V race, the Weekend Warrior program. Check them out. That's how I spend my Saturdays when I am not at the racetrack or recording podcasts. And of course, Solo Performance Specialties. We're coming up on a couple of weeks. Oh, gosh, too soon, I guess, for the Solo Nationals. Dave and his crew will be at Solo Nationals, and they're at a lot of the Solo National Tour events as well. If you need anything for your solo racing program, from tires to numbers to whatever you might need. If you have a street car and you want to put some belts in it, that's where I got my belts for my car. Check those folks out. Really good people. And not only are they here to help us buy stuff, but they also participate with us. And they're really, really great folks. That's our first tech tip on Inside the SCCA, and our tech tips are brought to you by Babyface Fabrication, and this one is interesting, and it's a simple one, but I wanted to bring it up to folks. I found these at Harbor Freight, and if you use zip ties a lot, they are awesome. They do so many things, but they are one-time use applications. Once you put it in, if you've got to take it off, you've got to start all over again. I found these when I was working on our live stream broadcasts for use to keep our battery packs up on a tripod or up off the ground, and they're really cool. They call them silicone ties. Silicone. They've got two, and I just found a second one. This is the 24-inch version. This is the 12-inch version, and essentially it is it's a tie, and I believe that on the inside is a piece of flexible metal of some sort. It is covered with a silicone coating, which is really cool, which makes it pretty protective and all of that kind of stuff. And what's cool is you can take whatever you're going to wrap And it's a lot like the tie you get with a loaf of bread. So when you get it, you just twist it down. You put a couple twists in it, and then if you bend it over, those twists are not coming off, and that is as strong as you're going to get. Every bit as strong as a zip tie. But what's really cool about these is they are definitely reusable. So if you have an application like in the car and you might have to swap it out, I'm thinking potentially cabling for your camera mount, cabling for your radio cables if you have something like that, cabling for your drink tube, that kind of thing. And it's also cool because with a zip tie, if you put one zip tie here, it's done here, but then you got to use multiple zip ties. With this, you can take it on, let's call this a roll bar, and you could roll it down the roll bar several lengths like this, and now you have a long piece of cable that has been managed for a pretty decent distance. So, and if you want to move it, very easy. You are in and you are done. Once you put it on, you get it into place, and if you want to readjust that cable, if you need to move the length or whatever, it works really, really well with that. I don't know. They're not expensive. I think they're $4 or $5 for a set of two, and I can go back and look at the numbers. I'll put links in the show notes. On this particular Harbor Freight, I don't have an affiliate program with them, so I won't be getting anything out of these links. So occasionally I will have an affiliate program on those links, and I'll let you know when that happens, but with this kind of thing. So it's really cool. I use a bunch of these. I just found these shorter ones, which I've got definitely going to have some good applications for that. Obviously, the shorter ones won't go along a long roll bar. Those will be kind of used like a traditional zip tie, where you'll find one spot. You might use multiple of them. But lots of really cool ways to use this. And the other thing is with a zip tie, when you cut the zip tie, you've got that little sharp end to it, which can, if anybody's ever worked on the inside of a car, you got cuts and scrapes all over your car from the edges of zip ties if you don't use a really good zip tie cutters, flush cutters, and a lot of people don't, frankly. There's no sharp ends, so you eliminate that problem altogether. The other part that's really cool about this one in particular, because it's red, you know exactly where you're looking for stuff. It's not hard to find, and there's just a ton of different uses for this in the car. Also in the garage, also in your trailer. I can see a bunch of that. So that's our first tech tip here. Babyface Fabrication, bringing those tech tips to you, and I really appreciate it. If you have an idea for a tech tip, leave it in the show notes, and we'll get back to the show. My guest, Dayle Frame, he is our Area 4 Director. He is our interim chair of the club racing board. And let's start with the global picture. You wrote a letter that was posted on SCCA.com a couple of weeks back, or a week or two back. And essentially, you had a very elegant way of saying what I say, and that is, if you aren't going to get involved, quit your bitching. Yes. Your letter was beautifully written and crafted, but essentially, it was get involved. Become part of your local region. Join the club racing board. Join one of the advisory committees for a particular class. And I take it even down more granularly. Become a flagger. We can't race every weekend, or maybe we can, but if you can't, still come out to the racetrack and help out as a volunteer. That's so important. That's how this club works, right?
Yeah, you've obviously been to quite a few solos, and when I quit club racing a few years ago, I started soloing my cars, and I realized that solo is very much more hands-on.
Right.
In order to drive, you have to work.
Right.
In club racing, we don't do that.
Right.
We say, drivers don't have to work tech. They don't have to be in registration. They don't have to do timing scoring, all that stuff, because they're drivers and they're working on their cars and all that jazz. And I think that as a group, we club racers miss out on that. That we as a group just don't understand how phrase I used earlier, how the sausage is made.
Right.
And I've known this for a long time because I was assistant RE and I was a race chair and a bunch of other things. As you mentioned, everybody wears a lot of hats. And so I realized this a long time ago, but now I'm in a position where I can actually do something about it other than, bark at the moon.
Right.
And so I get installed as the CRB chair back in January, and I realized very quickly that when I look at the letters that are sent into the club, that there are quite a few of them that are written with the best intentions,
Right.
but clearly don't get what they're asking and what how the system works. They're not asking the right question to affect what they want to see changed. And that's basically just a lack of basic understanding. Now, that's not anybody's fault. That's just the way the system is set up. If you're campaigning a Formula Ford and you're working on it, and you're doing this and doing that, and you're paying the entry fee, you don't want to have to take time away from your car and your family at the track in order to flag a corner or work in tech for a session or whatever. It's just not how the system is set up. And so I thought, well, what's the next best way to get folks to understand how the system works? Well, it become part of the system.
Right.
And that letter, I like the phrase you used. You can't bitch about it, but of course, as a CRB chair and a board of director member, I can't really use that language.
I can.
So I basically crafted the letter and said, listen, if you want to have a more effective club racing program for
Right.
you and everybody else, we need more of you in the driver corps to be a part of the system. How can you do that? Well, you can volunteer to be on one of these advisory committees or the CRB itself. You can join the stewards program. The stewards have a very vital function in overseeing how the race is put on and how it's managed and all of that. But even more locally, get more involved with your
Right.
region. Become an officer or a volunteer worker on a weekend when you're not racing. You'll get so much out of it. That's why I was a F&C worker before I got my pilot's license, just because I wanted to know how the system behaves and who
Right.
does what. And that helped me in my racing career because I wasn't sweating. Who do I talk to about this issue? Oh, I know because I've been there.
Yeah.
And so there's more than one way to get involved in the system, and I outlined some of those. And with any luck, we'll get some positive response from that. We not only do we send it out as an article on the website, it was included in the latest fast track, which will be sent out I guess in a day or two. It's going to be part of the quarterly meetings that Abby Scher puts on, where the REs come on and we talk to the REs about a bunch of things. And I'm going to go to the REs. I'm going to say, hey, we've started this program. You REs should be prepared to accept people from the driver corps into the fold.
Yeah.
And be prepared to understand what their wants and needs are and how they might interact with your local club. And so there's multiple avenues that we're using on this, and hopefully it generates some interest and some folks get involved, and we can make a better club, a better program, better categories and classes, and that sort of thing.
Right. We're going to do a whole different episode on how to be more welcoming.
Sure.
And I say that because I hear it not more often than I'd like. That,
Sure.
you know what, I wanted to go volunteer and or help out, and I showed up, and they didn't really want me to be there, or they acted like I was in their way, and that's problematic. But that's a whole different episode. But if you are going to ask people to volunteer, you're right. You have to be ready to accept them in and do what you need to make them want to continue showing up. And that's across all of our programs. Before we get to the nuts and bolts, what was the response? What kind of feedback have you gotten, just top level, from the letter?
I've gotten a few emails to me directly. I have answered a couple of those. I'm still formulating one that came in yesterday. We will be discussing it at the CRB meeting we have Thursday and Friday in Kansas City. And I'm hoping that there's been some folks that have sent resumes in and all of that. It's a little too early to get the big picture, but initially, a lot of folks are absolutely for this. One guy said, "Well, it's been a long time in coming." Well, if a letter like this, which states the obvious, is a long time in coming, that speaks its own volumes.
Right.
And we need to work on that sort of thing.
Yeah. So there's a phrase in the club commonly used called, "Thank you for your input."
Yes.
And for a lot of people who, as you said, write letters, they feel that the response to most letters that is "thank you for your input," and that response is brushing them off or blah 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 blah. And you mentioned something very right at the top here, which I find very interesting, and that's kind of why we're doing the show. If the letters were written differently, the results might be different. Just because you write a well-written letter with good arguments doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right thing to do. So let's start with that. But I don't think enough people understand how the process works. That's accurate. Yep. Let's start with that. Okay. I'm race driver Brian, and I'm driving in, spec derby. I don't want to disparage anybody. Right. And I've got an idea that I want to have, I want to use one set of tires for the entire season in my class. And I want to write a letter to the board. I want to get this going. Now, it's obviously that's an absurd idea. We don't have that class. But for the sake of discussion, how do I go about the process to get it actually given seriously consideration?
I'll answer that question in a second. I want to address the "thank you for your input" thing.
Oh, sure.
I'll just take a minute for that.
Absolutely.
My predecessor, John LaRue, the very first words out of his mouth when he sat as chair in whenever it was, January of 22, I think, was, "We need to get rid of "thank you for your input." We need to send back responses that are much more informative and much more eloquent, properly worded, you name it. Because if Brian's writing a letter about tires in spec whatever, then probably a bunch of other people might be interested in that very topic too. So we need to address not only Brian's letter,
right,
but the group. So I have continued John's legacy in that fashion because I want a response that is effective and well thought out and more than just "thank you for your input." That is the bane of my existence. I have seen hashtag TY, whatever the initials are, on the back of race cars, and it drives me crazy. And so we have done our very best to answer letters so that they're much more thought-provoking and whatnot. Now, to your question, step one is to think about how to organize your letter. Obviously, a well-worded letter with some data in it carries more water. If you know some of the folks that are on your advisory committee that oversees spec, whatever you called it, I would reach out to them. say, hey, I'm thinking about this. What's the best way to communicate my thoughts to you guys? Because you're going to be the ones looking at the letter first,
Right.
and go from there. If you don't, that's okay. Each individual advisory committee, or AC as we call them, will reach out to, or they should be reaching out to the author to try to get, are you talking about X, Y, and Z, or are you talking about R, S, and T? And try to focus, things. So the letter gets written, you send it through the log, and it goes to headquarters, and Scott Schmidt and Scott Dobler, there's a general account there, and they direct it to the appropriate
Right.
um, AC. The AC gets put on their agenda. They have monthly meetings, and then they talk about it and figure out what to do with it. And if they're confused about it, they'll ask. And if they're not, they'll either decide one way or the other. And if it's really controversial or whatever, they might throw it uphill to the CRB, and we'll discuss it. And so we ping pong it back and forth until we get a consensus about it and go from there.
So let's break down we have so many acronyms in lingo. AC is the advisory committee, right?
Correct.
And it's not every class, because I know like it's the touring advisory committee, right?
Correct. Each category has its advisory committee. So there's a touring, super touring, production, FISRAC, Formula Sports Racing Advisory Committee. There's the B spec and C spec are in there. So yes, there are multiple classes that'll be under one umbrella, but there's also the SMAC, the Spec Miata Advisory
Right.
Committee, where they have a single class, and whatnot. So each advisory committee has liaisons from the CRB.
Okay.
So there'll be 4, 5, 6 people that meet, and there'll be 1 or 2 liaisons from the CRB that will sit in on those calls, so that when we have our monthly CRB meeting, they can report, what did the SMAC talk about? What did the touring AC talk about? What did FISRAC talk about? And which letters are what we call hot.
Right.
They're controversial, or they need much more discussion, or we need some focus on it and what have you. And so that's how this letter rises through the system.
So who are the types of people on, let's start with advisory committees?
Well, they're as a production car guy, I'll
Sure.
throw the pack under the bus, if you will. The production car advisory committee has, oh gosh, probably 6 or 7 people on it. I know most of them. Kevin Ruck is the chair. He's an F production guy. I'm an H production guy, but he's from Ohio. So I've been on track with him countless times. He's won a couple of national championships. Super smart guy. And so you'll see on the production committee, there's a range of folks that know VWs, or know Hondas, or know Old English stuff, and whatnot. And they're all drivers. They're all smart and good at what they do. They understand the class. They understand the rule set. They understand the engineering. And so if you write a letter and say, hey, I'd like to classify the 1984 widget in H production, they would know immediately, oh yeah, that widget, it was a pretty decent car and a right size motor. And if we make it weigh this much and give it this kind of tire, it could probably be okay. And so they have the expertise on the local level, or that level of expertise to sift that out. The next layer of it is the CRB, where you've got folks that have expertise across a wider variety of classes and cars and whatnot. And so they don't necessarily need to have the minute details. Oh yeah, that came with an 1198 motor, not a 1214 or whatever it is, because we want the AC to do the heavy lifting, and stuff that they can't figure out or they want guidance about, they'll throw it uphill to us.
Right. So the ACs are a more granular level. those folks are either current or past drivers with a particular expertise, hopefully in somebody for everything that falls under that AC.
Right. Exactly.
And they're the ones who are really pulling back the onion on these proposals and requests.
Yep.
How often does the AC send something to the CRB that says, yes, we should do this, and then the CRB says, maybe we shouldn't?
Um, Not very often. The beauty of the way this system works and the beauty of the people who are on the ACs is that they generally know what the CRB wants. They know what the guys like Brian who write the letters in want, and so they are very effective at figuring out the right path. But you're right. There are times that an AC throws something up. We go, whoa, no, that's not what we're thinking. That violates the category ethic or what have you. Um, and so there are times we kick it back downhill. More often than not, when we kick something back downhill, though, it's not that we disagree with the premise. It's that we're not maybe we don't understand what they're really asking. Can you give us some clarification?
Sure.
And that's where the liaisons come in. Uh, Sam Henry is a CRB member, and he is a production car guy. I think he's building an ST car now, and he's down in Springfield, Missouri. Super smart guy. And so, if I have a question, or we on the CRB have a question about what the AC was thinking, we'll say, "Hey Sam, we don't quite get this. Talk with the chair and figure out what's what here. Make sure we're all on the same page so that we understand what they're asking about. Are we talking apples and apples here?" And that's what the liaisons are designed to do. That they're the bridge between the AC and the CRB, so that we're all working together on something.
Does it help to have a bunch of other people sign on to your letter?
Um, it's interesting you ask that question. As you may know, and forgive me for the length of this, but
No.
I'll be making a point in a moment. Last year, we announced that because of the way the race groups were, we couldn't have Formula Ford Vs and 600s at HSTs,
Yep.
and things went sideways pretty quickly. And so I, at the time, I was director of Area 4, and I got a call from a guy who's a Formula V pilot from Ohio, and he said, "Hey, I need to talk about this." And I said, "Sure." And we talked and talked and talked. We talked several times. In fact, we talked on election night. I was waiting in line to vote, and he called, and our conversation lasted long enough. By the time it got time to my time to vote, I had to duck out and go out to the car. And 45 minutes later, we finished our conversation. So we got an extensive conversation about things going. And he asked the very same question. And so I said, "Okay, here's what you do. Instead of you writing a letter and 3 dozen of your fellow Formula V pilots cut and paste and write the same letter, that doesn't help. You're saying exactly the same thing.
Right.
There's a better way to do it. Sign on to a letter as a group. Work something out. Work the language out. Get your points. Work on it. Work on it. Work on it. So you get the points in order, and you've got your thesis there, and you've crafted a really well done letter. And then the next guy, driver B, can say, "I agree with that letter," and C can say, "I agree with that letter." And as soon I don't know if you've ever sent a letter in to the board, but when you get an email back that says your letter is number 34567, so now driver X can say, "Hey, fellow Formula V drivers, reference letter 34567," and now you got all these people, and that speaks more to us than a whole bunch of cut and paste.
Got it.
And as a result, and the good news is that as a result of these conversations with one driver, he and I agreed that he would be his contact on that side of the fence, and I would be the guy on this side of the fence.
Sure.
And that his group could talk to him, my group could talk to me, and we would talk. And the same thing happened with Formula Ford. A fellow named Stefanelli, I think his first name is Tony. I got to see his proposals about things, and he made some very good points, and we adopted some of them, which basically came up with this bonus majors program.
Right.
And I got to meet Tony at the June sprints. And he and I chatted for a long time. And I told him, listen, I really appreciate the way you guys worked together as a team on the other side of the fence. You helped us out. Hopefully we're helping you out. And you guys can work as a group. You know, the Formula Ford and the Formula V guys each are working together to prove us wrong.
Yeah.
Work up your numbers, hit events hard, work as a group. Much like Frank Schwartz did with B-Spec, work as a group, start a community, and get the numbers up and prove us wrong, and so that we can make this a better program. Sorry for the long-winded part, but that's where I was headed.
Well, no, and I wasn't sure we were going to tackle that subject here during this because, you know, obviously that has been a huge part of what the club has gone through in the last 18 months. Yep. But the CRB and the advisory committees do so much more than that. So I'm happy that we've gone there a little bit. So, you know, first of all, everyone on the CRB is a volunteer, right?
Oh, yeah.
All the advisory committee members, volunteers, right?
Yep.
You get these big paychecks as volunteers, right?
We do.
Yeah.
I like to joke that I'm still waiting for my contingency check from British Leyland. That, you know, anyway. But yeah, you're right. Yeah. So we go to meetings and we spend each AC has a monthly meeting. So they're all like on, you know, the second Tuesday. Our CRB meeting is the first Tuesday of the month. The production committee might be the third Wednesday.
Right.
So every month we meet. And so you add all those hours up, and there are thousands and thousands of man hours spent per month to update the GCR. And there is a lot of effort on that to make sure that document is accurate and up to date and whatnot.
So, as volunteers, it's not hard to just try to stay out of the fray, to have that be your mindset. When you make a decision like was made to basically reorganize the face of what is arguably the largest program in the club. Mm-hmm. I've been involved since 1986, and I believe this is the largest reorganization of how we do things in that time. It would have been really easy just to leave things the way they were. So, and someone who has really no monetary skin in this game, when you have to know that this decision is going to piss off a crap ton of people. But sometimes it's hard decisions need to be made, and that's why, you know, and there's no anybody who watches this shows a lot knows that from, I believe, episode 1, 200 and some episodes ago, I said the SCCA has way too many classes, and it's confusing. It takes away from track time and all of that. So it's hard. It sucks. People are going to be upset you can't make everybody happy. You're going to make some people, but it would have been easy just to keep doing what we were doing.
Sure.
But the decision was made when you know it's when you know the button's going to get pressed to send it out to the membership that this is happening, do you go hide for a week?
Well, so you've asked several questions inside that one question. Yes, before before I was chair, when all this started, I was just the BOD guy from Ohio, well,
Right.
Michigan. Area 4 is Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, and West Virginia, and so I was just the representative from that area. But we knew that this was going to cause ripples in the pond, and we also knew that we had to be prepared for it. Um, and so we worked up talking points, and we worked up emails that we sent back and forth to make sure we were all on the same page. When is this going to be dumped so that we knew when we could start expecting some of the blowback? The CRB, I'm sure, did the very same thing. I wasn't the chair at the time, but I was a liaison. And so we knew that we had to be prepared for it. And what do we talk about? So that Director X wouldn't say something different than Director Y.
Right.
We had the talking points memos, and we had conversations about how to be effective at saying these things. And to be honest, yes, we could have kicked the can down the road, but and the way I explain it is that the CRB and the BOD did not make decisions for 6, 8, 10 years that painted us into a smaller and smaller corner.
Mm.
And another idiom is that if it was an easy decision to make, it would have been made a long time ago,
Right.
right? So yeah, we knew when we pulled the trigger on some of this stuff that it would be deleterious to some folks. Others would applaud it. Um, and this is where it sort of ties in with the letter I sent that if we had more folks involved and more folks who understood how the big picture is generated, then maybe these ripples in the pond wouldn't have been so large.
Right.
Smaller ripple.
If we
So
can
yeah.
pull back the rug one more little bit.
Sure.
When this discussion, I'm guessing that these discussions have been going on at the board level for years. But where did the initial idea of cutting down classes, where was that started? Was it at the board? Was it at the CRB? Where was the first, when things really got in motion that we got to have to change, we have to affect something, let's really make this happen? Where did it start?
Uh, you're right. There's a couple of ways to explain some of this to you. You're right. Where there has been talk for years about combining classes or eliminating classes or doing this or doing that. How do we get a better product out there? We had data from survey after survey that said the drivers who are coming into club racing want nothing to do with 50 hours of prep in order to have a 1 hour race weekend, right?
Right.
They want spec classes. They want unanimity. They want ease of operation. They want arrive and drive. That's why we see classes like GT having so much trouble. It
Right.
takes more effort to put a GT car on track than it does a Spec Miata. No disrespect to my Spec Miata friends, but they can arrive and drive. You can't do that with a GT car.
Correct.
You just can't. Um, and so, yes, there's been talk of this for years and years. It wasn't until the spring of 23 when we had an additional spring meeting, additional meeting in the spring of the CRB that we said we really need to come up with some big changes. And Peter Jankowskis, who was chairman of the board of the big board back then, said, "Okay, we'll fund a meeting for you guys in the spring of 23. As long as you come to us with concrete solutions. You've got to have ideas." And that was I was liaison at the time to the CRB, and that's what I told them. Okay, we can have a meeting, but we better leave that meeting with something that's tangible that we can take to the board and say, uh, these are our ideas about how to move this forward. And part of that was generated by the fact that at the runoffs the previous year, we had to cancel the Formula Atlantic and
Mm-hmm.
GT1 races because of lack of cars.
Yep.
Uh, and, and that's just it's just a fact.
Yeah.
That kind of product, when you take away two races like that because cars don't show up, and the ones that did show up in GT1 blew up or broke or
Yeah.
whatever, that's just not a good look. And those cars are paying the same amount of track time that Spec Miata does when they showed up with 48 or
Right.
whatever. And that was the year of the dead heat in
I
Spec
know.
Miata.
I was there.
Remember that?
Yep.
Um, quite possibly the coolest photo I've ever seen of race
Yeah.
cars. Right there on that beat. And so we realized, okay, that runoffs it didn't come off like we wanted. We need to do something. That was the kick in the pants. That was the first domino. The meeting in the spring of 23, um, we got things going, and that's where those things germinated.
Right. What I wanted to establish with that question was where it started, because Eric Prill was the face in front of a lot of these changes, and a lot of vitriol, in my opinion, was
Oh yeah.
unfairly spat at
Yep.
the national office and Eric in particular.
Oh yeah.
And I knew the process because I do this every day. I am probably as have an understanding of the machinations of how this club's works better than a lot of the membership, just because of 30 episodes of this podcast and my 30 years of experience. So I knew a lot of how this was supposed to work, and I don't think that the people out there necessarily understood that these decisions were born from the volunteer members and not from the national office. That's why I asked the question without prefacing the question, because I wanted to hear it from you.
Yeah.
And I think that's important that,
That was a dark time.
yep,
Eric. Now I've known because Eric was a prod car guy
yep,
for all the years. He won several titles. A super super nice guy, and I've known him forever. And he showed us some letters that he had gotten, and there were some letters that were sent or emails, letters into the system that accused him of everything
yep,
you could think of. And I wasn't going to stand for that, nor was the rest of the board going to stand for that. We crafted a letter and put it out saying that this was a CRB and a board decision. It is not made by staff. Staff is there to execute what we on the board dictate.
right,
And that's again, a fundamental misunderstanding of how the system goes. And we had to back him up aggressively. The folks who wrote letters like that, they were dealt with, and we just cannot have that kind of vitriol and whatnot in this club. This is a club.
yeah,
It is made up of members, and hopefully we can all get along. But if you want to go there to somebody who's on national staff or on the board or whatever, you're going to have a conversation,
yeah,
and it'll be rather one-sided.
yeah,
And so, like I said, it was a dark time that we had to do that, but we had to do that.
yeah.
And so, yes, there are folks that misunderstand that, Eric's relationship with Mazda
Right.
and all that clouded their opinion of things. And it's just simply not the truth.
Yeah.
Not the truth.
I
Thanks for bringing that up, by the way. I appreciate that.
Well, and I never saw any of the stuff. I just knew the stuff the letters were out there.
Yeah.
I didn't need to read them. I'm a forward-facing human being, and I know what I get when I piss people off.
Oh, sure.
And obviously, there's a lot of people invested in their cars, and so what I can't affect their racing program, but that doesn't mean I don't say
Come on,
things.
Brian. Let's admit it. You're the guy that wants the spec tire that'll last a whole year. You
Yes.
are fooling yourself, and you are the worst
Yep.
guy there is.
No question. But I just think, and in my dealings with national staff, and I keep this podcast independent of the club for the purpose that you and I can have this conversation. Sure. And I can say whatever the F I want to. And I've pissed people off at national. I'm sure I've made some people uncomfortable with what I've said on the board level. But I also ride the dance that I am the Super Tour announcer, and I do get paid by the club to do that. But I have permission from the club to use Inside the SCCA. But beyond that, that's the relationship. I do have a great relationship with the national staff because I have to ask them for guests and that kind of stuff. But every time I've had to ask a tough questions, Mike Hobbs been on this show, and I have asked him hard stuff. Sure. And they answer it and they come to me. And they've never asked me to not ask a question. And sometimes they tap dance, which all good political leaders do. But nonetheless. But I will tell you one thing, and I hope the people at home realize this. The people at National love this club. And I have never heard anyone or seen anything that makes me believe that the decisions that they make or how they execute, whether you would like it or agree with it or not, aren't done without what they feel is the best interests of the club in mind.
Yes.
And I will go to my grave believing that. And if someone at the national level ever shows me otherwise, I'll be on this podcast talking about it.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things that's interesting, I learned this as a director long before I got to the CRB, is that if you talk to the average member and you say, hey, how many people do you think work in Topeka? They might say, oh, God, there's got to be 50 or 60 people out there. Well, it's more like 18 or 20. I don't know the exact number. But you also look at the length of their employment with the company. And, there's 12, 15, 18, 20-year members. Yep. Deanna, I think she just turned to 25 or something like that. Now, I'll tell you, I've known Deanna long enough to know when she was working with Terry Osment back in the day. And my wife and I did lunch with her. I'm going to guess it was like 2005 or something like that. And we were doing lunch, and she said, oh, yeah, I think I'll do this for a couple more years, but I got kids and they're going to be in high school. We'll have to do volleyball and soccer and all that stuff. I don't know how long I'll stick with it. Well, fast forward 20 years, and guess who's still driving to the office every day?
Right.
And so it's that kind of dedication to the club and the efforts and all of that that speaks volumes.
Yeah.
And so when I tell that member, no, there's not 60 people out there. It's more like 20. And if you ever drive on I-70 out west to the mountains or something, stop in Topeka and say hi.
Yep.
Yeah. You'll see what's behind the green curtain and who the wizard is, right? And it's not a fancy building. There's not it's just nice to see those folks doing their thing.
Right.
And I encourage everyone to do that.
Yeah. So on that note, we're getting to the point. So I have an unwritten rule that I don't like to take the shows much past an hour because I think people check out. But I want to finish this up by following through with what I say is that when I need to be critical, I will be critical. And now you're going to get a little bit of my feedback, unsolicited.
Bring it on.
So while I exactly understand why things have happened, and I appreciate the fact that not everybody's happy with it, the one thing I don't think we've accomplished by these changes is track time. We're down to 18 classes. I think that's smart. I think it's going to be easier to understand. I think it's going to be, there's some growing pains on campaigning the classes, and that's going to get worked out. But the one thing, we still have 7 or 8 race groups on Super Tour weekends. We're not really giving anyone extra track time. And I think that was one of the things that people were like torqued off about, is that, okay, we're going through this pain, but we're not getting really what the consumer wants, and that's more time on the racetrack. I don't know that you have any way to respond to that at the moment, but let me just put it out there that that should be the next thing that the CRB and the board is tackling, is how to turn all of this into more time behind my wheel on the racetrack.
Yeah, full disclosure, I'm a chemist who's retired from a few years ago, and my whole life, my whole career has been to take data, collate it, formulate policy and theorem, and then execute that, right? So while we have hundreds of races every year, with hundreds of locations and classes and all that jazz, it is very difficult to gather meaningful data about this program, because we've had things thrown at us like hurricanes and pandemics and other things that get in the way. And so I will preface what I'm about to say by saying that it, when we had the runoffs at Road America, we were criticized because, oh, now it's horses for courses. We want to, and when we move it around, and then there's no consistency. So it's a double-edged sword. But I will say that we had the immediate success of SMX was a ripple in the pond we did not expect. Mazda didn't expect that.
Right.
And so now, okay, we got a second group of spec Miatas, and so what do we need to do? Well, we had to make some tough decisions and whatnot. And so this is an ever moving target that we have to constantly adjust for. And you're right, it would be nice to be able to have some of this shake out so that we could get more track time for the competitors. But I don't know if that's going to be feasible. I can't commit to that,
right.
But I say we're working to try to get the best product available,
right,
and whatnot. So I hear you. You are not alone, brother. Believe me. There are things that we're trying to get some insight on. Gosh, it would be so nice if that magic 8-ball spoke the truth every time, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
And we're not mind readers. We do not have a crystal ball. We need the membership to tell us what they think is important and give us some guardrails as to how they want us to navigate this stuff. We cannot operate in a vacuum, and so we need that input from the membership, and that input is the letter log.
Right. So I've thrown this out a couple times, and I haven't written a letter. Maybe I should. But I have a board member and the chair of the CRB sitting in front of me right now. And I ponder the thought of, are our drivers willing to pay a little more on each race weekend for taking the 10-race Super Tour and saying each class is going to be invited to 7 Super Tours, and each race group will be invited to 7 Super Tours, and then you remove 2 or 3 race groups per Super Tour and find a way to schedule them so that you now have more track time. And instead of became, the best at the end of 7 races or 10 races, it's now the best points at the end of 7 races. And everyone sits home for a couple of races, but then you end up getting 90 minutes of track time on a race weekend instead of an hour. or whatever the numbers are.
Right, right. I've not heard anybody with that permutation of things. It's certainly intriguing.
Yeah,
Um, you know,
because I'm already spending $5,000 to go to a race.
sure.
I'm already putting a crap ton of money down. If I'm only going to 7 weekends, and I can now spend $1,200 for my entry versus $700 for my entry, but on that race weekend, I'm going to get a lot more bang for my buck. That sounds like the money makes sense to me.
I would think that there's some way to. Let me back up. There are pockets of classes within the country.
Right.
There's a whole lot of GTL cars. Well, it used to be
Yeah.
GTL cars in the Northeast.
Right.
There's lots of B specs in Texas. Boy, you can't
Mm-hmm.
sling it in cat without hitting a B spec in Texas.
Thank
And
you,
so I
Chris
would
Taylor.
think that, yeah, exactly. And I would think that if somebody mapped where classes are in the country and could come up with an algorithm that says, okay, if we uh, if we have 6 of 7 race groups or 7 of 8 race groups,
Right.
where are low car counts going to show up, or where high car counts going to show up based on location, right? Let's pretend we're a real estate agent. We say, okay,
Mm-hmm.
Road Atlanta, they're neck deep in whatever,
Right.
and we could do that. There may be a permutation that allows that, and that is an excellent letter to write,
Yes.
senor, as page 2 after your spec tires.
Exactly.
But
Dayle.
that's the kind of thing, in the letter, one of the things I brought up was we can't think of everything.
Right.
I would like to think that I am all powerful. I am not.
Right.
Believe me. I've been married to the same woman for 37 years. She reminds me of that shit every day. So the upshot is that if you bring a new idea and we go, God, that's a great idea. That's the kind of thing that's the kind of input that we welcome, because we may be able to do something with that.
Right. Dayle, thank you. This is a conversation that's probably long overdue. Thank you for being the first guy to step up and say, I'm willing to do it.
Oh,
And we banged through a bunch of stuff here. We've talked about some hard topics, and but I think we've educated some folks, and that's always my point of this show, is to make people a little bit smarter, or maybe pull back the layer of the onion on a portion of the club that they might not be aware of. And this is a really important conversation that I think there's some places we can expand upon this as well for future shows. But thank you for helping me work through my technical gremlins at the top of the show, and so we could get this thing on the air.
If it's not part of your regimen already, in the show notes, if you want to put my email address and my so that folks can reach out directly. Obviously, it's on the SCCA website, but it might be easier for some folks to find it here. By all means, I am an open book, and I am glad to get feedback from the membership so that I understand what their priorities are. And their priorities need to be my priorities, and I can't think of everything, and so yeah, that kind of guidance is invaluable.
Yeah. I'm not going to put your email on YouTube.
Okay.
But I will people I think in the club know how to go to scca.com and click on About Us and find all of the email addresses for our area directors.
Sure.
I don't want the internet world to have that easy access to you guys.
You probably made a good point, sir.
But those of us who are members know how that website works, know which buttons to press to get to the right people. So, and every member of national staff has an email on there. Every member of the board of directors. I don't know if all the CRB members do, but as the chair of the CRB, you're on there as the Area 4 director, and you could be reached.
There's a single email address for the entire CRB.
Got it.
And I think that's on that About Us page, or how the rules are made.
Sure.
Page,
Sure.
Something like that.
So.
Yeah.
All right, my friend. Thank you for being here. I look forward to seeing you probably at the runoffs next.
Absolutely. You are most welcome. The pleasure's mine. I was worried about my presentation and stumbling on words and all that jazz. And think we did a pretty good job.
I think we did a great job. All right. That's going to do it for another episode of Inside the SCCA presented by RaceSchool.com. Do you like what you see? Do you like what you hear? Subscribe to the Racing Network on YouTube and the RacingWire Podcast Network on the podcast platform of your choice. We have a new podcast every week. If you'd like to leave me a message, the best way to do that is either in the show notes here or in the comments here, or you can hook up with me on Twitter. It's @RaceAnnouncer is my Twitter handle. Leave a comment here, good, bad, indifferent. I'm good with that, but really appreciate all of you for tuning in. I'm Brian Bielanski. Have yourself a fantastic weekend. Stay safe and go play with cars.